Justin, he brought up force to vote, and I remember when the force to vote conversation first started. I actually had a slightly different take because my take was we shouldn't vote for Nancy Pelosi. Period.
Right.
You know, like that's where I started at, and then I heard the force to vote strategy. I'm like, well, if you're gonna vote for it, at least get something out of it.
Mhm.
So the idea that people who was against that, like, so you're just a pure voting for Nancy Pelosi advocate? Like they're very like the people who still argue about it. They very passionate about the concept of voting for Nancy Pelosi. But the reason I bring this up because I follow your work and your content. And you refer yourself as a healthcare advocate. I wrote in great detail my second piece I have on my Substack, Progressive Martial Artist Substack. Check it out. How Medicare for All is actually the most pro-black policy platform. And when I canvassed for Bernie Sanders, I framed it that way. And the first reaction people would think like, oh, what about reparations? Reparations has to be, yeah, I am very strongly for reparations. But you can get capitalists to support reparations. You know why? Tom Steyer support reparations. You know why? Because the capitalists know they're going to get that money back.
It's just going to go right back.
Yeah.
It's going to flow right back into their pocket.
Yep. And Black Americans, despite us being 13% of the population, despite us having 1 out of 10 of the wealth, I actually think it's worse now, especially COVID, the wealth of white Americans, we hold 35% of the medical debt in this country. So this is
just crazy, bro.
The state, like we only 13% of the population and we have less funds, but we still have 35% of the medical debt. So that's why they want reparations, because even when we get reparations, guess what? We that money going right back to the medical debt.
Right.
So
no. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you good. I was just want to ask you, like, what's your experience and what led you to be such a staunch Medicare for All for advocates? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I've told this story, quite a few times, but when I was 3 or 4 years old, my mom passed away from breast cancer, and obviously at the time, like, I'm 3 or 4, I don't really know that much is going on. Obviously, it's really traumatic time for my family and whatnot. But once I started getting into left wing politics, I started to wonder, like, man, my family went through a serious, healthcare situation, and I wanted to kind of gauge, how, what our financial situation was like at that time. I had 2 parents, middle class parents. My dad, kind of first generation, really getting out of poverty. He was an engineer. My mom was an accountant. Her parents grew up in the city, so once again, like first generation, actually kind of getting out of poverty, kind of into the middle class. And what I found out was that my mom was worried about getting further treatment for cancer, and it was a pretty aggressive form, so it wasn't that long of a fight, but she was worried about, going longer, getting this treatment because it could have completely bankrupted my family. Now, imagine that situation, right? You have 2 sets of Black Americans, right, come together, get married, they're trying to build their wealth, first generation out of poverty, and just like that, someone gets sick, and then, had it been a longer fight, we could have completely been bankrupted, and having the fact that my mom has to sit there while she's dying, potentially going to leave her kids, her husband, her family. She has to sit there and think about money. She has to sit there and think about, do I want to keep fighting because I don't know if it's going to bankrupt my family and put us back, to basically where our parents were and have to try and start from scratch. Like, that is the society we are living in, and that it does not make me unique. That makes me actually very common, because there's 500,000 families every single fucking year in this country that go bankrupt, that work their whole goddamn life for something, and then just because someone got sick or one of their cells decided to attack their body, now they have to start from scratch. Oh, and by the way, your credit score's fucked. You can't buy a house. You can't do anything. That's the society we live in, and people just sit here and take it. And that's what makes me so frustrated. That's what makes me so frustrated, that you could still go out there and accept someone like Joe Biden, who's going to go to bat for these same people that are screwing you time and time again. And you're going to act like this is some fighter for you. You're not going to do every single thing. You're not going to withhold your vote for him until he concedes to fucking sign Medicare for all. If it gets through the Congress, we're just going to sit there and just vote for him. Like, this is the message we got to start bringing to Black Americans. Because like you said, Nick, they can't win without us. They cannot win without our vote. Lyndon B. Johnson, I believe, was the last Democratic president to win the white vote. It's not happening no more. So they need us. They need us. Yeah. And until we actually start stepping up and being like, no, we're not going to just vote for you. Yeah, the Republicans might be marginally worse, but guess what? Our lives still suck. We are still getting screwed. We are still working as hard as we can and not getting anywhere. Guess what? We had a black president. We had Bill Clinton. We've had 2 or 3 Democratic presidents. How are those? How is Compton looking? How is Southside Chicago looking? Huh? Because I think they still look pretty similar. In fact, they probably have gotten worse.
Yeah.
So we have to stop looking at these Democratic politicians who, just because they can come and be comfortable around black people, unlike Pete Buttigieg, that's the bar. That's the bar we're at. That's the bar we're at. If they can just be kind of comfortable around us, you know what I mean? Like, we have to get away from that shit. Like, and it's frustrating. Like, and I'll tell a quick story. You know, when Mike Bloomberg, stop and frisk Mike Bloomberg, was in the race, I started to probe my grandfather from Mississippi, moved to Chicago when, you know, he was a young adult, worked there, lived there his whole life, and he was actually he was actually like, you know, I don't think this Bloomberg guy is that bad. He's giving all these jobs to these black Americans, you know, giving money to all these black groups. And I'm like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. That's all it takes, for real. Like, we got to get away from that shit. And, you know, I honestly am upset with myself because at that time, you know, this is my grandfather, you know, he's the patriarch of our family and all that shit. But I should have been like, nah, fuck that. You know, I should have spoke up and said something to him about that, because it's not acceptable anymore. And we're at a situation where we can't sit back and just not say nothing because, oh, they're our elders, or, oh, you know, we don't want to upset them, or we don't want to get on their bad side, et cetera, et cetera. Nah, it's too late for that. We all too grown for that. And this situation that we're in is too dire. It's too dire.
Right. I'll go hard on black boomers. Sorry, I'll get you in here very soon, CJ. I go hard on black boomers because I think the time to be nice is over. I tell you all the time, black boomers sold us out to the police state. They did it twice. They did it in the 90s, and they did it while voting for Joe Biden. And it's time for us to have a very, very hard conversation. But your story, this is why I wanted to ask you this, and this is why we started Fred Hampton Leftists, because it's easy for people just to say there's a healthcare crisis. And this is why I framed the issue of Medicare fraud the most pro-black policy, because we all have stories very, very similar to what Justin Jackson went through. And my grandfather, by the way, died 25 years younger than Henry Kissinger. How fucked up is that? You know why? You know why? My grandfather, who's a law-abiding, great family man, lived 25 years younger than, shorter than Henry Kissinger, because he never went to the doctor. That's a thing in the black community. So why do people not understand that Medicare fraud is the most pro-black policy? Like, he died because he didn't detect his cancer fast enough because we can't afford to go to the doctor. That's the reality of what it means to be black in America. The reality of what it means to be black in America is your life expectancy is 5 years lower than white people. Why do you guys think that is? Healthcare plays a giant, there's a lot of myriad reasons, but healthcare plays a giant role in that. A giant role. And like, you have, even when we have rich oligarchs die, it cracks me up. But even Sheldon Anderson, I mean, these people living way longer than people in our community, because what's the difference? They have great health care. That's it.
And they look dead for about the last 30 years of their life.
Yeah.
Like, Kissinger's looked dead for like 20 years. Like, how is he still alive?
Listen to this. Listen to this, guys. If what are the Democrats saying to the black community when they're denying single payer? When black people are the most, or would be the most, affected by single payer health care, because we would finally get health care. It is so common that black people don't go to the hospital, and you know, they want to, oh, black people don't like, no, it's not that, it's money.
It's all money.
Have money, or we don't have health insurance. But think about that. Black people, 35% of the medical debt. Who's responsible for pushing the bankruptcy bill? Then we have hundreds of thousands of black bodies, black men in prison, away from their families. Who's contributing to this? Like, the Democratic Party sitting back watching us, our constituents, by their own words. They're watching their constituents be shot by the police, die at a higher rate of the pandemic, and do nothing. I don't understand how a black community don't see it. It's like, Forget naming the street MLK. I would like health care.
Right, that part.
Amen, man.
Washington, D.C., I want $25 an hour health care.